maybe to start with, obviously since the beginning of 2022, you've been building ElevenLabs. It's been more than 3 years now. In 2025 now, what are the sort of use cases and really interesting cases of people using ElevenLabs that you are seeing? And maybe as well, if you could speak to, without giving too much away, how you think that might change over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I think the one thing, and as you think about the company and what makes ElevenLabs special, is that we combine the research work across audio AI and then product and deployment of how you can use that research in a lot of the different contexts. But unpacking it a little bit further, and the way we think about it from inside out is, on the research side, we started with text-to-speech, so being able to generate audio. That then moved into creating voices and recreating voices. Then, of course, adding on the speech-to-text aspect to be able to understand what we are saying, orchestrating that all around, and more recently, deploying the first music model on the licensed data. So kind of all of the audio coming together under one hood. And on top of the research, we have 2 key offerings. One is our creative platform offering, and the second one is the agentic platform offering. And on the creative side, it's what we started in use cases that are very familiar, from narration of an audiobook, a voiceover for a script, a dubbing of a movie to another language, adding soundtrack to all of that. And on the agentic side, and that's probably the explosion we are seeing across the space, is probably all of us here have heard agent words too many times, but everybody's creating an agent. We do think that's part of the future, where you will have an agent for your personal case, for your business work, and voice is such an important part for interacting with the technology around us through the agents. And that's where we've invested a lot of time to build the platform for you to be able to configure the agent, deploy it, test, monitor over time. And probably that's where I continuously see all types of different use cases coming across, whether most recently it was, we work with chess.com. They're of course giving you a narration after you play the game of what you did right or wrong, but they are now experimenting and creating an agent that will be on your headphone, helping you through the game to understand how you're playing as you are learning, and maybe going a step deeper, where you will have one of the incredible chess players and their voice kind of going you through the game. So for chess fans, it could be a pretty cool ones. Or more recently, and something that we would have not predicted that happened this year already, is working with Epic Games on bringing Darth Vader with the estate into Fortnite, so millions of players could interact with Darth Vader. As a Star Wars fan, it was incredible, and of course an iconic voice. But a lot of those dynamic use cases that just 3 years ago were completely not possible at that quality are now possible. So that's some of the more commercial and interesting ones. And then all the time we're seeing all the personal use cases that people are creating completely new work. I think one of the more interesting ones recently was combining, or trying to combine effectively, what does AI radio of the future look like? And there's probably a component of you listening to maybe a podcast that has been created based on the content that you're interested in. Then maybe you stop the podcast, you speak with the podcast to understand the topic, but then you get music personalized based on what you were just listening to and having that created. And we just saw this use case trying to be created a few days ago on a concept where it's a 24/7 running radio that everybody can dial into.
Wow, that is a tremendous breadth of different use cases there. So I can have Gary Kasparov coaching me, or Magnus Carlsen coaching me through my chess, which would be very useful, 100%. I think.
Gary Kasparov is also very tough. I met him recently. I don't know how much I can say on this on the live stream, but I met him, and he's a tough person. But he did tell me a tip, which was not a chess tip, which there's a Lovable hosted or Lovable helped host an event in Sweden, and Gary was speaking at the event, and he said that, I actually didn't know I will have to speak, but now my trick for preparing for that is I look at the date of the event, I go to Wikipedia, I see what happened, and then I try to refer to what happened on the day in that story. So that was a nice little one for the future.
Perfect. I think you. So we started talking about agents. Let's dive in. I think you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, shipped the conversational AI platform towards the end of last year. That was earlier than most. I think people called 2025 the year of agents. You sort of nipped in ahead. I feel like like you say, you've seen a lot of like major companies deploy this technology now. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing and things that you hope to sort of solve as this year continues?
Yeah, so there's like kind of two parts. There's a part of like how do you make the technology sound as natural, conversational in the agentic experience, and of course there's the other, which is probably the bigger part of how do you actually connect the business logic, connect and what do you actually want the agent to do. On the first part, today most of approaches across the space, across most of the voice agentic or agentic platforms that are using voice will combine speech to text, LLM, and text to speech. So a cascaded model or like the 3-step approach model. And there's a lot of benefits in that approach. It's very reliable. You can exactly know what it will do. You can implement steps in between. All of the components are usually optimized for that experience pretty well too. And it works well in the context of customer support, call center, and a lot of the places where that experience was so poor before. The other approach in that research aspect is not having a cascaded model, but moving from speech to speech. So as a voice agent and human speak, it generates both at the same time. So there's no like 2-step approach, which effectively means it's a lot quicker. The latency it can go almost immediate. It's slightly more emotional, although we think this is fixable, but it's less reliable. And that's as you think about those kind of two different paths. So the cascaded approach or the multimodal one-model approach. That's a very interesting one of how that will develop in the future. From the company perspective, we are working on both approaches at the same time. So we are researching today developments in speech-to-text and text-to-speech and cascading and orchestrating those together, and then speech-to-speech of what that will look like. But from the market adoption, what I think will happen is different use cases, of course, will adopt them at different time. For the places where emotionality matters more, and maybe some of the like quicker latency, but also the risk of hallucination is lower, that will start moving to speech in the next 6 to 12 months. For the places where it's all about reliability, or that's one of the key aspects, that I think will take more of like 24 months approach. So a good example, like personal assistant for non-executing actions, so just gathering information, probably speech-to-speech models in the future. Help with a refund as you are calling in or booking ticket. You really want that information to be correct, and that's a kind of even the sliver of the basics. It can go, as you think about healthcare, financial services, doing that at scale. That starts moving in an even more reliable manner. So that will take probably the next 24 months. So that's on the research aspect, and as we think about our work, it's hopefully solving both of them. And then you have the other aspect, which is the platform piece, and that's what we realize as we work with a lot of the clients, is that you have the agent, but the agent to actually be useful needs 3 things, and then you need to at least 3 things, and then you need to deploy it in a set of steps as well. First is the knowledge base. Of course, you want to bring a lot of the information. Hopefully, with Granola, one day we can collaborate on bringing all that information and giving and being more personal to you on what you need, or in a business sense, what's the business logic? What are the documents that the company cares about that you can pull into? The second one is integrations. To actually make any of those agents useful, you will of course have a how does it grasp for new information. So this can be more simple ones like Salesforce or ServiceNow or Google Drive data and bringing that into equation on the input side. But also as you think about the output or how you get the agent to actually perform those actions, how does it connect to telephony systems and is able to do a phone call for Twilio or SIP trunking and different. So all those nits on the integrations are kind of the other big aspect. And then the last piece is functions in that equation, where you now want the agent to, for example, if it's not performing well, swap to human. What are the conditions for that swap? Maybe swap a language if someone is calling in, or when does it end the call? And there's just so many of those functions that can be created in that space. So that's on that kind of second big group of like what agent needs to perform, which we built in the platform. And I think there's just, it's still scratching the surface as you think about the global deployment of just so many that might be needed. And then, of course, as you now have the agent, how do you actually bring it to production? And that's probably the hardest aspect in a lot of that work, which is you need to test it first with some mock-up of what's happening. Then you need to evaluate that as you bring it into production of how you improve that over time. And then as you think about not only improving whether it's succeeding, can you then use some of the insights to improve the process itself for the company, which is kind of, as we think about our platform, our vision, is kind of how do you combine all of that. And maybe to finish this piece up, of course, as we are speaking through that, that's like a lot of the building blocks, but as we think about the use cases, you really want to obsess about like what are you solving, which vertical you are going after, and then templatize or make those building blocks very easy. So if you are working with a company in a retail space, probably the things that they will care about is how do you call in, how can you place and explore the product offering, how can you place the order, get information, and get an email. So you are having like a set of steps of process that need to happen. Of course, you need to provide your address information, but all of that it can be templatized, so it's a lot easier for that interaction. Now, as we move to, say, a financial services space, the set of actions that the agent needs to take is very different. And as we think about our work and kind of one of the learnings as we think about a lot of other companies starting, like you kind of want to start from the end of what is the use case you're solving and then move back to the building blocks of how you're building. So to summarize, research, multimodal, speech-to-speech, and cascaded approach. That's where we see the future. The both of those approaches are really important. So think about the building, the product part, knowledge base, integrations, functions. As you think about deploying the agents, it's the testing, evaluating, monitoring, and fine-tuning over time. And then as you think about bringing that all together, it's like, what's the use case that actually solves?
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. There's a number of pieces that I want to dive into, so I'll put a pin in a few of them, and we'll come back to you later. But I think one of the interesting things I think about when I think about ElevenLabs and deploying this many agents is like the scale of that. So like recently GPT-5 came out. One of the sort of, one of the things that was mentioned was the fact that the Marina score was a different model that wasn't shipped just because they have 700 million weekly actives. They can't ship a model of that kind of power to that many users. There's just not the GPUs. How do you in ElevenLabs think as you start to deploy to like massive companies, like that trade-off of like cost and scale and the power of the models, be that like if it's a speech-to-speech or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I'm in a very lucky position where I get to work with my co-founder, my best friend of 15 years, who has been able to assemble, who we think are some of the best researchers in the world to ship completely new models in the audio space. So as a result, we are in an extremely good position where frequently what we create across a lot of the models or research is completely new, and it's frequently expensive to run. On the other side, but what is a kind of the optimization, or like how we think about it today, it's important for us to bring all of that technology to the market, to be able to give that technology to all of users, to show us the art of possible of all the use cases, and then of course learn from that and optimize over time. And that's roughly how we approach that across the time. Slightly different in the early days where that capital equation was a bit different. We were optimizing very much from the start. But now as you think about our work, if it's a new model, we want to bring it to the market, assuming it passes the safety checks and reliability checks. We want to bring it as quickly as possible without as much of the cost consideration. However, for the models that have been already and we know how users use that, what are the use cases, in parallel, we optimize them for that inference and effectively making sure that we can economically sustain ourselves. So that's kind of the split. And of course, now we have so many different models across our work, so we will prioritize the ones which have slightly higher usage, but from the optimization for performance on that side. But that has been a very, very valuable on our side on deploying the models, which is bringing it quicker, seeing all the incredible things that people create, while optimizing the ones that are coming in. As I look outside of the space, and of course we are in a situation where we develop the models and the products and are working with the users, but of course frequently, as you think all of the companies, they will use existing models inside of their product from external vendors. And the way I understand, at least, the economics work in this way, in case this could be interesting or useful, is that frequently the margin on the self-serve distribution is lower as you optimize for just getting as much of the mindshare. But as you think about the enterprise or that scale adoption, that's where the margins start being a little bit more healthy, with, of course, the goal that the self-serve is a little bit more controllable. The enterprise is where you have a little bit more economical power. So hopefully over time, they can effectively toggle that depending on what's needed.
That makes sense. Well, just speaking to that last point, the agents that ElevenLabs builds today, is that targeted sort of more prosumer enterprise? And do you see that changing over time? Could you see ElevenLabs making a consumer sort of agent?
Yeah, currently most of our users will be bigger enterprises, bigger companies at scale that would work across the agent or building their conversational AI experiences. Like Epic Games is a good example, or Deutsche Telekom, Cisco, Twilio, and kind of that sphere. So like a truly scalable deployments of customer support at scale. But at the same time, what we are seeing is that a lot of the developers are trying and testing the technology. And we took an approach as we thought about building from the start, a lot of the company work is that everything that we build, almost everything that we build for enterprise, actually makes it back to self-serve product offering too. So if you are an independent developer, you have incredible product experience for a lot of the work. Of course, it doesn't come with the same contractual guarantees, but you have a lot of the same features that the biggest companies would. That same approach that Stripe is using in a lot of their offering, which we found extremely helpful. And in process now, there's like 10 million agents that people created for all types of users, for all the crazy ones, from of course the personal assistant to. We ran a hackathon, I think it was 8 months ago, where there was two people built an agent protocol that everybody could build an agent, but it went viral for a very different reason, where as they saw so many agents getting created, the question appeared of like, okay, what happens if two agents start interacting? So let's say your personal agent calls a restaurant that answers with an agent to take the booking, and yours makes the booking, and they effectively created this protocol that two agents speak together and use the protocol to optimize the information flow a little bit quicker, which I think might happen actually in the future, where you will have so many of our own agents interacting with business agents, and then they will swap to their own language, which is exciting and scary. But, you should check out the video. The language they at least mocked up there is pretty cool.
Wow. Okay. Well, interesting. Just one last thing here before we wrap up agents. I'm always interested like how you evaluate, how you benchmark these kinds of like really complex multi-step flows, the kinds of things that you're going to need if you're like support, or even if you're later on, developer cooking up your personal assistant. Probably the one that's the buzziest right now is the Pokemon one, where it plays Pokemon and it tries to get through all the steps. Is there an equivalent of that for voice agents, like a benchmark that was never really intended as a benchmark, but internally you're like, actually, it's pretty useful as a thing to try?
I think the truth is, it's like the benchmarks for most of the voice audio are pretty poor. Like I think they aren't very, very good. Especially as you think about the multi-flow agent workflows, like the truth is, it's better to look at like what are a set of use cases that were deployed for a given company, or in this case us, and like compare whether your case studies, your use case kind of fits well to that model, and then cross-reference across that. We've seen some benchmarks hit or miss on building blocks. Speech to text, easy. That one you can very easily benchmark. Of course, that has been done for a long time. I feel like it's my cue to say we've created a model that beats Gemini, OpenAI, Whisper on that benchmark, which is on all of those benchmarks too, which is great. So that's an easy one. Then on the text-to-speech side, it's a little bit harder. And it's harder for one of the key reasons is that the way you will enjoy or judge audio partly depends on the voice you hear. So now the only way to truly judge this would be to select the same voice from all the text-to-speech providers on the same fragment of text, and then assess the sample. But it's hard because not all of the providers will have those voices, or maybe not easy to set up the kind of the cloning or the creating paradigm across all those providers. So you cannot do that. So you end up comparing different voice from different text-to-speech providers and then judging. So that's what usually benchmarks do, and that gives you a kind of a good indication. Where happily we are also leading in most of them. And then on the orchestration or the agentic side, that's I think there will be like some preference score that you speak with a human, and can you detect whether it's AI or not, or whether you enjoy the experience, and then go pretty deeper from there. But no good existing benchmark yet.
Well, that brings us to an interesting thing, actually, because I think you've spoken about it before, the voice Turing test. I wonder if you could just describe like what it is, and maybe like, because I feel like ElevenLabs is getting extremely close at this point to passing that. If you could maybe talk about the journey to get here so far, and what you think is maybe left in terms of convincing me that it's a human on the other end of the line.
Yeah, as you think about our agents' work, our clear goal is we want our agents to pass the Turing test in all of the circumstances. And that last piece is important because you could argue that in some cases it's already better than the human would be, and you actually can enjoy the experience. And we think that's true as you think about a lot of customer support, like current either human or IVR workflow. It's definitely better than IVR, and then frequently better than the human one. So we think there are some use cases where the threshold is already passed, and others where they aren't yet. Like as we are speaking, and as you're speaking with another person, they will pause, they will nod along, maybe they will interrupt, maybe they will say something super quickly or slowly, they will adjust, they will think for a long time, and you kind of know what's happening. And I think all of that we would like to fix. There's like an easy, let's say you asked any of the agents around, can you count 1 to 11, and as you count the numbers, accelerate the counting. So you start slow and you move quicker. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and it's kind of accelerating. If you try any of the agentic workflows, that isn't possible, because that kind of reasoning combination with audio and then adjusting audio within the sentence that's being created is actually a super hard problem. But any other human would do it super easily. You would just ask and they would be able to do that. So that will take a bit longer, but of course, the proportion of people that will actually do that test is also tiny. So in
just
many
the experts.
yeah, just exactly. Hopefully everybody here will do the test now.
Anytime I get a call now, I'll ask this.
Or maybe that's a good test.
Yeah.
So that kind of set of use cases will definitely there will be like a niche of cases that don't get fixed for a pretty long time. But I think the main things today is latency. How can you bring it below? So currently, I think end-to-end between turns is around a second. I think you need to get it like 300, maybe 500 milliseconds to get it like truly snappy and great. Then emotional, contextual, like emotionality. So as you are speaking, they kind of infer the emotions you're speaking with and are able to adjust that based on time, or they being voice agents. And I think that's the second big one. And then third is effectively how do you take some of the different actions that might take time, but you want to still make them feel natural. So it's the same, and of course that's where maybe the multimodal space will help, but there are some tricks in other spaces too, where now, of course, over the last 12 months, you have reasoning models where if you ask it a question, it will take a slightly longer if it's an in-depth question to reason about it and take additional set of steps, versus a snappy question if you are rewarding a sentence. In the agent side, the same, of course, will be true for the reasoning part, but that has an impact on the audio side too. And that audio experience of like how this happens might be harder. So like if you ask me a hard question, maybe I need to think for a little bit, and I tell you like, let me think for it. And then if I think for too long, maybe you ask me like, do you know yet? And like, how do you orchestrate that operation will be a little bit harder. So I would say those three. So
That makes sense. Yeah.
Latency, emotional, contextual emotionality, and then being able to kind of weave in more of the reasoning thinking elements.
Okay, interesting. One thing, as we were talking about this, that sort of sparked my head was counting from 1 to 11, like getting faster, that sort of like vocal gymnastics. It feels, like you've just released ElevenLabs music that recently, and like singing feels quite similar to that in some ways. Like it's like changing pace, it's doing all these sorts of different, more complicated things. I wonder if you could just briefly talk about what you've done in music and what you think that is coming next for ElevenLabs music. Yeah,
the music is definitely like it's a good thing in audio that as we think about our audio work, a lot of the initiatives across the research are effectively connected. So some of the innovations we will do in music space actually help us on the text-to-speech space. Speech-to-text model that we started was actually a result of us just using so much data and training that we didn't find any of the speech-to-text models being good for transcribing, so we need to create our own to be able to rely on that. And on music, so you're 100% right there. Have the amplitude of emotions is just so big that you can, of course, then maybe use some of those ideas to make AI laugh better, cry better, or more human. And all of that is kind of tied into. But maybe a little bit on the music model. So we worked with partners like Merlin, which is the fourth major effectively, or Cobalt. And of course, the pool of data that's available through those providers is much smaller than working with all of them. So that took us long on finding the right agreement between the parties. But then on technology side, we had like a number of ideas over the last, I think, 12 to 18 months that we were working for. So it's a long time that we thought the model was ready. But the challenge was like, how do you create this incredible experience where you can provide a textual prompt and then get the music about anything you give it and make it sound good. And that's where the research team shined through, where they figured out how to, once again, bring on a similar subdata of something that sounds as good as or better in some cases than other models. And what's next now is, like, as we think about it, is the main thing will be a preference optimization of, well, we create a number of tracks, we see which ones follow the prompt better, which ones give it the more emotionality, and hopefully use those preference information to then fine-tune the model over time. So that's one big one. Second, we are continuously expanding the set of partners that works across. So these are some of the inputs, but we are also excited about the kind of the layer on top of the music. So currently you can prompt the music to life, but how incredible if you could work with artists' likeness with their opt-in on creating something that you are familiar with, or have their song and swap some words that will make it more personalized, or tear Dick and turn it into other languages so they reach everybody. And kind of that's where we see the next music evolution, where the model will improve in quality, but second will be working with incredible artists, vocalists to bring their work in their context or give that context to everybody else. And then the third one is we, of course, over time now, we have ability for people to create their own voice on the ElevenLabs platform. So outside of music, you can create a voice, you can share it, so you can earn money on your voice. So if you are keen, that's definitely an option, and you get passive income. But the big part of that is that people use that in a plethora of different settings, from voiceovers, narration, to sharing the voice to others and earning money. But of course, the interesting thing will be bringing those voices into a music model as well. So for the people that want to hear how they would sing, that could be an interesting one. I'm a terrible singer. I would really want to replace my real singing with my AI singing, which hopefully is good, and get that across, which is tricky, but that's what we would love to figure out as kind of the next aspect in the next milestone.
So much there to unpack. I think maybe if I can, just the thing I want to zero in on most is perhaps the bit about emotion. You talked about like the emotional range in singing. Obviously, it's the heart of so many songs that we all love to listen to. But also in the text-to-speech models, right? Like how emotional should these voices sound? And there's this weird moment I feel like right now where it's like, obviously there was the pushback on GPT-5. It was too like cold and logical, and people wanted 4.0 back. But then before that, there was this thing where people were like, oh, it's too agreeable. It's too, how do you think internally and maybe advise your customers, creators, businesses, developers like me about how emotional voices should sound? And yeah, how do you unpack this? It feels like consumers want two different things. Yeah.
It's in our case, we are trying to make it as emotional as possible and then tame it back if needed.
Okay.
But we had one of our clients who was deploying an agent in a logistics space, and initially what they've done is it was a perfect, clean type of voice experience without any imperfections, any mistakes, and people were giving feedback that it sounds really good, but it doesn't feel very human. And of course, the next step they've done is they moved the voice to add the hms, the ums, the pauses, and suddenly their completion or like the people that would stick around through the conversation doubled. It was like from 40 to 80%. And it was like incredible where you kind of wanted to make it like kind of more imperfect to make it actually perform better. So we've seen this repeat a few times. But in voice space, which is interesting, it like really depends on the person. So now we have a client in Asia where their population of users is like a very healthily between an older population and a younger population. And they're calling in, it's a healthcare company, and they want to, for the older population, serve voice that speaks slower, calmer, and helps them guide through, and for the younger, slightly more emotional, quicker, to optimize that experience and maybe even stretch further. So that's an interesting one where the ideal version of the future would be that you can like kind of personalize that based on the user, where you have a full plethora of options. And then maybe optimize on both sides. So what business serves and what customer decides kind of overlays on top of each other.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. I guess one of the last questions, then we'll pass it out to the audience so you get your questions ready. One of the things I'm always interested in is, like especially with ElevenLabs, right? Like you're going up against these huge players in AI and trying to recruit top talent. You know, you said yourself that there's maybe 50 to 100 top like AI talent in audio. Like how did you attract them at the beginning, and like I guess how did that change as you scaled and met more and more success?
Yeah, the talent is definitely the one of the key things where without that you cannot do anything. In this case, I think most of the credit goes to Piotr, who is a researcher himself, which of course is like he's able to create some of the best work in the world, and that of course shines through. But then when we were thinking about the first set of researchers and hiring them, the way we would approach this, we would send samples to those researchers to show them the work. And it was like kind of always the two parts. Like one, we are hiring, would love to speak. If not, would still love to speak about the space. And in almost all cases, they would reply and at least do the second one and not the first one. And that sample approach really worked, where like we actually wanted to share the work pretty openly at that stage. And kind of that approach continued. And of course now, as you think about our work now, and attracting more talent and moving from the first 5 to then the kind of the next 10 and then the next 50 on the research side. The one of the key elements, and it's also true for product and engineering, is that working at ElevenLabs, you get a very close proximity to the user, to shipping your research, to shipping your product. So a lot of the work that you are researching can get deployed very quickly to production. You see real impact of that work. Second thing is that as we think about the company, voice and related aspects is our top focus. So by working at ElevenLabs, you get to be part of that where that work that you do is one of the most important works in the company. And then of course the third one, we are in this incredibly lucky position where the AI is changing the world around us, and ElevenLabs can change the voice of that world. We can create what voice of technology looks like. That for research, go to market, engineering. If anybody wants to join us, will help us bring it to the next stage of hopefully incredible experiences.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think we should open up and let some of the wonderful people here chime in. So if you have a question, feel free to put your hand up. Yeah, gentleman in the white. Just maybe say your name, maybe what you work on, that kind of thing, and then, yeah.
Sure. Hey, I'm Luke. I am a software engineer. Maddie, I was really curious. I don't know that much about the use cases for voice models. So I'm very curious about the deployment and then what how you need to approach the customers. Do they tend to be like, hey, we really want this and we're not sure how to integrate it? Like, do you have to do a lot of learning? Or they're more like, say, Twilio, a tech company, where probably you don't have to be as hands-on? I'm just really curious about the enterprise deployments, like what they tend to look like in rough categories.
Yeah, and of course, so in our case, there's the big self-serve side and the enterprise side. And so the enterprise side, it really varies. But to give you like a deeper answer there, you're right. Like more of the tech-forward, innovative companies like SF, Europe companies are definitely very quick and can work with their engineers on that technology. But that's a small subset. Most of the companies, especially when you're deploying like agentic workflows in like a true enterprise, FTSE 1000 companies, usually they will not have the talent at the moment to understand AI or have the engineers to work as quickly with AI. So you do need to supplement that in our case with like for deployed engineering motion, which then we'll partner with the client, help them configure, help them how to fish and then configure that further, and then actually work together on deploying that. So that's like a core part of offering as you think about any of our like kind of strategic deeper engagement. It will come with engineering resources to help them across. Of course, over time, what we hope is we'll be able to create playbooks for making that easier. And maybe last thing I would say there is, like apart from engineering for helping them deploy, the other thing is like the change management process of how to manage this very different workflow from very defined if this then that to a lot more LLM-based approach. The people that are involved, assessing, evaluating, testing, this like all are like slightly different changing in the organization. So you do want to help them at the very least show what you've learned of the other companies, and then they either can take it or not.
Let's go ahead. Gentleman in the black.
Some part of the previous models have been replaced in the existing use cases that existed. So where are you seeing like more growth come and adoption from?
Yeah, I think so. Both have been increasing, but I think the agents increase quicker. So the main blocker before was that if you combine speech to text and text to speech, the latency for that operation was just not good enough. And that crossed that cusp of like, okay, now it is in the last 12 months, 12 maybe somewhere in that vicinity, which now kind of opens up this all plethora of use cases across those settings that weren't possible before, and they are better than the human writing. So that is probably like, as we think about the work, growing the quickest. And then in existing use cases, yes, the voice also became better, and that kind of layered on top of image models, video models. It's sort of kind of all compounding or building on top of each other. So even in like standard video work, we're seeing more usage, narration, so audiobook or articles being read out loud. That is also seeing innovation, and we are still thinking like there will be an additional kind of step change there, where the audiobook of the today is someone reading the audiobook. In the future, you'll have maybe multiple voices, sounds, background tracks as part of that audiobook experience. So that's still coming, we think, and it will continue accelerating. But your clear answer to your question would be agents, because they became possible and weren't possible, or like voice agents, and on the narration, it's continuing growing because just the use cases can get better with the new model iterations.
Just to clarify, when you say latency here is the time taken from text to speech conversion, or is it for agents the full execution of a separate task itself that has come down?
Also a combination, but more the full execution of so like latency is, of course, the text-to-speech latency was one of the biggest factors. Speech-to-text was already pretty good. LLMs also got quicker. So combination of LLMs and text-to-speech now is pretty good. And then how do you combine it together? Which is actually tricky, because if you are, say, we are speaking, before you finish the sentence, I'm trying to guess already what I will say based on until you finish. I have my response produced, ready to go. And then you finish, and then I can go, but that kind of changes over time. So that's like one of the tricks we will do in our case in the LMs, where we have probability function that, based on what is being said, already pre-generates. When it actually stops, then it actually brings it to life.
Lady on the sofa.
Hi, my name is Kate. I'm a product designer at Intercom. One of the projects I just wrapped up was like building adaptive pages, like that adapt in real time based on where the user is coming from, especially in enterprise. So it's like been really cool working on that. But one of the things we shipped as well was thin voice. Basically, I didn't ship the thin voice itself, but like basically as part of that experience. And I'm curious, there is a whole truck right now around how voice is the future too. Do you buy into that? What's your take on that?
It's pretty biased, and I do think voice is the future interface. So for the record is clear there, but of course not for all use cases. I think there is a good portion of use cases where that's true, and you're right. I think design is going to be crucial in like how what does the user interface even look like in that future? But it's like a simple task. Let's say you are ordering food. Today, you go to the app, you select the item, maybe you look for the specific item across restaurants. In the future, like let's say I want to order a pepperoni pizza or like Hawaiian pizza. Let's say it's more unique, so a small subset of places. Then you don't probably need to know which app does it have, which restaurant. It just like kind of summarizes that information to you. But then in food delivery, you probably want to see how it looks to some extent before you make that call. So then in that interface, you need to surface that information somewhat, then decide, and then get it shipped. Maybe you look at reviews at some point, but this could be spoken. But you definitely want to see how the food looks. So I do think design is critical. And in the way we approach this as a company, we have a huge amount of focus across the company at design. Like it cannot be like a function that like you have a team working on design layer across the company. In our case, we have effectively like internal agency that gives all the teams a design resource and works with them to ship that in both the product experience, in our go-to-market side of work, of how we think about and speak about the work. Even sometimes in the research team, there is conversations of how the research will look like so design can be prepared. So it's like a very wide-ranging piece that is across the entire company. And I actually think still that interface hasn't been figured out. So we are still hopefully the ones that will figure it out.
Another lady on the sofa.
I hope you can be honest, but are you...
That's another one.
But you can tell me honestly if you want to. We can collectively get you drunk and confess. But are you working with Johnny Ive and some old man on the new device, the screen-free voice coach to help you interact with the world? And if you cannot confess publicly, that's okay. But what would be the top few capabilities that you are so excited to do in a way you can change the way we interact?
So we work with a number of hardware partners that release their products now or in the future. That of course are like kind of figuring out how to make that experience. One of our public ones is a company called Curio that is shipping toys that you can effectively. The idea is that they will teach you subjects through the voice interaction. Or one of the companies here in UK. Which creates Yotta. It's a company called Yotta, creates Yotta boxes where you have those little cards that you put to the box as a kid, and then you get a story, and then in the future maybe that story will be interactive, which is a beautiful use case. My nieces love it, and that's kind of like as a still like before this breakthrough of how do you create those models on device and actually make them interactive. So that's the biggest issue. You can of course do it through API, but usually the connectivity one might not be perfect. There are different circumstances, gets destroyed, they're shipped for a long time. So that is kind of the main thing that needs to happen. From my perspective, the most exciting would be edtech space of like how edtech can be morphed with hardware. The second one is like information capture, what Granola is partly helping to do. Like I would be keen to have some form of device now, ideally not taking it like a somewhat silent device, or like not too visible device that can help me take notes while respecting the privacy to some extent, and then help me capture the actions. So that's just kind of the big one. And then like I would love for Siri, Alexa, or any of those devices to reach their full potential.
Perfect, thank you. I've been neglecting the kitchen, so yes, lady in the black.
And I think it's kind of like due to your origins and your unique space in the market, because like
Yeah, we take a very platform approach where it's like pretty open, so anybody can build, which does include sometimes competitors. We even had a company in text-to-speech space building models for text-to-speech use our text-to-speech in their website to lure customers in and then swap it to theirs, which I don't think is a good business practice, but in their case it worked. So you can do it. Like as you think about developing like which products we develop on top, if it's a pretty horizontal approach, we likely will continue opening up our offerings. So in the agent space, like what are our common themes across all the clients that we can build across? So it's like appointment scheduling. We definitely want that type of workflow. On the creative side, it's also will continue extending. Today, it's all all audio space, all related. So the next good example would be lip dubbing. We know that people that will work with audio will want that too. So anything audio related in that space is our case. And then on top of, especially in the conversational space, we work with few customers deeply in a specific verticals. In our case, a good example is telco or telecoms, that we will work with those companies and try to build the entirety of the solution. But then there's other verticals which will require domain expertise, which we don't plan to or won't enter. So as I think about some of the companies you might have in mind, I think from our perspective, if they have domain expertise, they are completely safe and they will benefit from all the innovation we do. If they are just replicating a pretty vanilla horizontal function, probably, it'll be hard. Maybe they will win, but it'll be harder. But as we think about, say, healthcare and the deep understanding of the patient flow or a regulated industry in finance, it's such a different, deep understanding that you need to bring into the game that we don't plan to enter.
Cool. Two more, maybe one more from the kitchen. Gentleman in the white.
My name is Nico, and I'm thinking about AI voice agents in the hiring space specifically. And my question is around productionizing them. As you mentioned, it's just like TLDR. It's very easy for me to understand if my agent asked the right questions and if it got the data that it was looking for. But it's a lot more difficult to understand if the quality of that interaction, of that conversation, was high quality, at scale, thousands or dozens of thousands of potential interactions. Do you have any tips or anything you can say around productionizing something like that, on how people have gone about, the guardrails and making sure that the interaction, the conversation itself is good, is high quality?
Very timely question. As we yesterday, and that was like one of the happy moments is when the teams that don't work on the product then use the product and use that in their own setup and benefit from that. So we had our recruiting team build a hiring agent, which you can learn about the company, practice for your interview, see what questions might be asked in that interview setup. So a very informative based agent, and they deployed it yesterday. And the part of the reasoning is like we have so many applications that we do want to analyze at scale a little bit deeper of like who is curious, what questions are they being asked, less so from the process itself, but like how can we as a company do better to surface those informations before the candidates enter, or maybe filter things that we know we don't want from the candidates that join. And to be honest, like that part of the problem is pretty solid, where as long as we collect that, our platform already will give you the evaluation metrics. We have set up the success criteria of what we are trying to find out in that conversation, whether they failed or succeeded, and then bring that across. What we've realized now frequently is that you probably want to deploy the agent a bit earlier with less of success criteria and then optimize or add them over time, rather than try to predict all of them to start off with. Because otherwise it's a kind of, the endless loop of like, you don't know how they will actually interact. So the way we usually approach is we start, deploy, listen to a few and optimize that conversation. All this, of course, with the rights to being able to do that, and then optimize that over time. But I think it actually works pretty well, which is a good cue for our product.
Very cool. And we're using, I've already tested out and demoed stuff with ElevenLabs.
Amazing. Thank you.
Perfect. One last question. Gentleman in the shopper. Yeah.
My question's around research and making voice interactions international. I'm Linus. I work at Private Capital as an engineer. One of the things that I've seen in research land that's really interesting and exciting is full duplex model. So models where there's always an audio stream going in, always an audio stream coming out. That lets you, for example, talk a little bit over each other. It lets you say ums and ahs without interrupting the stream because of this role-based thing. But I haven't seen it deployed at scale anywhere. And so I could have two very closely related sub-questions. One is, do you think there's enough actual demand, particularly from these like larger commercial enterprise customers, to put in money to make it make sense to invest in research to commercialize this? And two, independently of that, what do you think are the biggest blockers to building that kind of model? Assuming, I'm imagining there's some architectural things that are different versus more typical models to make that kind of deployment.
Yeah, in some extent, like as you think about our speech-to-speech, and it's exactly like in the future, there will need to be a duplex model that has the kind of a lot more truly interactive experience. I think so that's the two questions. On the first one, on the enterprise side, we don't think they will take over in the next 12 to 24 months, mainly because of that reliability aspect, where for the duplex model, you need speech-to-speech. Speech-to-speech is less reliable than the cascaded model. You cannot have the safeguards in between of what's being spoken. It hallucinates more. And kind of tying that to your second one, the biggest blocker is the first one is only the safeguards of like how do you make sure that it actually follows exactly what you want it to follow across. The second one is reasoning of like how smart should the model be versus how quick it can be. So like it's like a trade-off of latency over the reasoning. So in our case, as we think about training out this model, maybe I shouldn't be saying this. So well, it's that's because I stopped myself on this one. So that's the second trade-off, the reasoning of the size of the model and how you bring that across and the latency. But I do think there will be like great use cases in the next 6-12 months that will appear. Hopefully, we'll release our model in the duplex model and within this year. That's kind of the goal, which would hopefully help us with the Turing test for some of the niche use cases too.
Perfect, thank you. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up now for this part of the evening. I think Matty will stay around for a couple of minutes, so maybe try and grab him. I just want to say thank you, Matty, for an amazing evening. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much.